The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The Gloves Are Off. I'm Moses Wolden. We have a great show for you tonight, including a few fine guests who will explain a little more in detail. How's your breath, Howard?
Moses, how you doing?
Not too bad, my friend. A lot to talk about. I know you've been busy with local hockey. We'll get to that a little bit later, but I know with yourself, definitely an exciting time for playoffs locally, trade deadline, that sort of thing.
Oh, everyone's in action, it seems.
For sure.
Everyone.
And I want to get to this guy. Talking about action, his team's going to be heading down to provincials later this week. I'm talking to Chris King, the women's basketball head coach. One of the best seasons the program has had so far. No pressure to you guys at all, but congratulations and how you doing?
The best, just for the record. But,
the best, okay.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Nice that you added that little blip. All right, well, you know what? We'll talk about the best. We'll talk about the best teams that came out of the trade deadline. There were a few teams. You look at Chicago's, you look at Montreal, north of the border. You could throw in even Winnipeg in this mix. Did very well for themselves. The New York Rangers, that sort of thing. Is there a team that, in your opinion, came out on top after the whole trade deadline day on Monday?
Yeah, I like what Chicago and the Rangers did. Obviously, Chicago was really good, and I think they just added to their depth. I don't see how people are going to beat them unless they suffer some more major injuries. So I really liked what they did personally.
Yeah, you can go get a top six forward and a top defenseman as well. I think you're pretty much set in Chicago to win. New York as well, got a great defenseman. Keith Yandel kind of went all in this season. They gave up all their prospects and said, we're just going to go in and win this year. So those are the two major winners. Montreal, another one as well. Got some nice quality depth players, which is for them is going to help them considering their size is a little bit smaller. So
and for cheap. You
very
look
cheap.
at Jeff Petrie, didn't cost them much, a conditional pick.
I think every Oilers fan is now angry at what they didn't get for Jeff Petrie. I remember we thinking that Simone Dupre from the Penguins went to Anaheim for Ben Lovejoy, and people are like, we didn't get anything. We could have had Simone Dupre or Ben Lovejoy in that case. But yeah, I think a lot of the Petrie.
It's probably the worst trade, yeah.
All right, well, you look at Anton Vermette, another pickup that the Chicago Blackhawks made the night before, or the eve of, on the weekend, rather.
Yeah.
That's got to be a steal considering what they gave up. They gave up a first, yes, but you look at, in the grand scheme of things, Chicago desperately needed to do something after you lose a guy like Patrick Kane, and you have the inability of Brad Richards to put the puck in the net.
Yeah.
Well,
it just adds to their depth. You look at where is he going to play, what line. It doesn't matter. They're deep across the board, and I think that when they made those two moves, I think everyone kind of said, okay, that's the team to beat in playoffs.
And they're pretty much taking that first pick. It's probably going to be a second-round pick if we want to call it that. So you're not really giving up too much in a very deep draft, but you're not giving up too much, and Arizona's fine. They're just stockpiling picks and happy with what they're going to get probably in the future because that's what they're building as a team. There's
one team we didn't mention and a player we didn't mention, Jaromir Jagr and the Florida Panthers. Did they not seem to win? Are they okay? To me, I don't know, I want to say they mortgaged their future, but they gave up quite a bit considering this is a team that never really gives up any prospects, players, that sort of thing. Did they give up too much to get a guy who's 43 years old?
Well, Jagr might play till he's 50. He kind of seems like he's one of those guys that's going to play till he's 50. Well, I watched the first game. What do you have, a goal and assist the first night playing from? So, I don't know. I think it's a lot to trade. I think they must have needed some leadership in the dressing room. I think that was a big thing. I don't think I would have paid it for Jagr, but who knows?
Plus, it's Florida. Florida has to make the playoffs, to get some fans out there, and every year they miss it. It's more and more, is this team going to move? Is this something's going to happen there? So, they're in the playoffs right now, or on the cusp of it, so they got to do something, and a player like Jagr is going to act, well, he said he scores, he adds points, he's 43-year-old, he's still putting the puck in the net, so.
And they need scoring. And look at the young guys that they have, the Barkovs, the Huberdeaus, who, by the way, he played on the same line with over the weekend. Don't those guys stand to benefit a little bit? If you could play like Jaromir Jagr, that's got to be huge for the Florida Panthers organization. Is that worth the gamble?
I think it's worth the gamble short term. And you think of those young guys, they probably watched Jagr play. That's probably who they grew up watching, right? So they're playing with probably a hero or someone they looked up to. So I think it's going to help. We'll see down the road if they give up too much. But if they make the playoffs and they get some fans out and more tickets, I think it's worth it.
We mentioned this, Jagr, 43 years old. Well, how about this? The combined age of his line mates, Barkov and Huberdeau?
43.
40.
And you got to think, when Jagr won his first cup into the Penguins, those two weren't even born yet. They weren't born until
That's
later
true.
on.
And
So
Yager had a full perm still.
Oh, that mullet was gone, man. That was beauty.
maybe that's
And
what they need to do. Barkov with a nice mullet. Can you?
Well, you look at the
Get
hair that
Huberdeau with a
Bobby
mullet.
Lou has. I think it's a match made in heaven that
What a
they
mullet
had
line.
Jaromir Jagr
That'd
join the team as well.
be a great mullet line.
All right, sounds good. Well, hey, that's a future. If they could get it growing, see how it happens. Maybe it helps them get to the playoffs. Let's talk about the biggest non-playoff winner. Who did not win this trade? Or the non-playoff teams that won, that is. I say Toronto. Toronto was huge because they let go of that Carson contract, and they did get up something for Daniel Winnick.
When you can give up the Clarkson contract, you win. Period. I almost put him in the winners over Chicago because he got rid of that. Such a bad deal, but they did. They got rid of everything and they got pieces, which is what they need. They got draft picks, which desperately is what Toronto needs. They haven't drafted well. They need those second, especially again, it's a deep draft. You need the second and third round guys. So I'd say they're out of the non-playoff teams are one of the teams I'd say that won there. Other one was Calgary for sure. I think Calgary by not doing anything, and they're not going to be a playoff. They're a playoff team now. They won't be when it comes to it.
Did you feel that they kind of got suckered by trading in Sven Barchi? I thought they gave him up for nothing, which I know he didn't fit because of they want to be that big offensive weapon, that scoring machine that has those big forwards and all that stuff. But he's a great talent. How can you give him up for so little?
Might have been a sneaky piece there, like a sneaky add. And I think Calgary's I thought they're in a weird spot because it seems like they didn't want to be this good. They didn't want to be playing this well this year. It looks like they're like 2 years ahead of the plan. And when you saw them talk about it, it's kind of, okay, we're in a spot, we're still rebuilding. So I guess down the road, if he didn't fit into the picture down the road, maybe that's why they let him go for cheap.
And eventually you got to give up on a player if you don't think he's going to be that. He's been playing time in the AHL, so eventually you got to ship a guy off if you don't think he's going to be part of that solution, even if he is a younger, and they did get a second-round pick back, so it's, in a sense, a mulligan for them. They didn't really give up anything and didn't lose anything in a sense.
Okay, then what about the Edmonton Oilers?
Edmonton Oilers.
2 firsts, 2 seconds, 2 thirds potential. Not necessarily you're going to draft all 6, but there's potential moves there. Maybe even package a deal with one of those talented kids like a Taylor Hall, Jordan Eberle, and then get something in return, which is much more valuable. A strong defenseman, a 1-2 defenseman, or even perhaps a strong centerman.
The problem with the Oilers always comes down to kind of like the Leafs making all these moves is you just have that feeling that they're going to screw it up somehow. That they're going to waste their picks. They're going to do something wrong. I think Petrie, would they get a second and a 5th conditional? It could move up to as high as a 3rd. Petrie was a 2nd-round pick when they took him. So I thought Petrie should have got a 1st, but maybe that's just me. I don't know what the trade market was, but you'd think a guy that moves the puck and can skate defensively. So hopefully the Oilers can put that into place. I thought personally Buffalo and Arizona did a good job of saying, hey, we're in it to get the 1st or 2nd pick. I thought that Buffalo, everyone knows they're tanking, and they're not ashamed to admit it, and they're doing a great job of, same thing as Arizona, acquiring assets and picks and saying, hey, we're going for 1st overall.
All right, guys, we're going to got a quick word for you.
Honestly, if you look at Edmonton's drafting, they're terrible drafting after anything past the 1st overall pick. So unless they change that system, it doesn't really matter how many picks they stockpile. They're probably going to screw it up anyway.
All right, sounds good. When we return, coming up from the break or after the break, we are going to talk about the Toronto Blue Jays and who can catch R.A. Dickey's knuckleball. We'll tell you who coming up.